Hello, today we are going to start with a new concept, concave and convex piping. Now, how do you do a piping? Now, as indicated earlier with the cutting of the template, as per the instructions, I have cut out my fabric piece of 15 by 15 centimeters and then cut out the concave shape here. And when I reverse it, I have the convex shape here on the other side. In addition to that, I'm going to use two bias strips for the stitching of the piping. I'm using a printed fabric for the piping, as you will also come to know the difference between which fabric is being used, and likewise you will also come to know how to combine fabrics for a better impact in pipings and facings. So let's get started. Now, first and foremost, I am going to take a single bias strip and I am going to place it right side facing right side. So as you can see on the printed fabric, this is the right side while this is the wrong side. Now I am going to place the bias strip along this edge, along the convex edge, and I am going to stitch it in place. Now, before you actually start stitching, you can hold the strip together and with the help of bead-headed pins, you can pin up the edge or you can directly start stitching it. So here, since the curve is not very steep, it's a shallow curve, so I can do horizontal pinning. But if the curve is a deep one, then you definitely need to do vertical pinning. So if you can see, the curve and the bias strip are getting attached very well together because the bias strip stretches, thereby aiding in a smooth stitching. So what I am going to do is I am going to stitch these edges together. So here you can see I have stitched the entire edge at a distance of 1 centimeter, which is our seam allowance. Now, if you notice, I have left a little extra of the printed fabric on the edge, and likewise I have to trim the rest of the bias strip, which is excess, but I will not trim it in line with the white fabric. I'm going to leave a little extra and then I'm going to trim the rest of it. Now, what we do is along this edge, we are going to trim the entire seam allowance and we are going to reduce it to 0.5 centimeters. Let's snip. Now here we have trimmed the entire seam allowance. Now we need to do the final finishing. So I'm turning it around and please pay attention. I'm going to roll this, fold this upwards, the entire bias strip. I'm pulling it upwards. Now on the edge, I need a finished edge. So I am folding in the strip till the point it comes in line with my poplin fabric. Now I am folding it down halfway through till the edge of my trimmed seam. After that, I roll it down once again and it automatically comes in line with my stitching line. If you can notice the stitches below. Fold it very neatly like this. You can tack the edge and along this edge we are going to do slip stitch along with the stitches, the base stitches. The seam line that we have, we are going to pick up stitches from there and do slip stitch. So if you see on the right side, you are getting a very neat edge, which is our ready piping. Let us first complete the slip stitch here and then we will do it. Let's start with the slip stitch. So I have done a double fold here. I folded in the raw edge first, then folded the bias strip halfway down and then folded it down completely. Now I am holding the folded edge together like so, and I am going to start with my slip stitch. So I have my needle threaded with a contrast color thread and I am slipping the thread, the knot of my sewing thread in between the folds. Once I do this, I will start with my slip stitch. So you can check how the slip stitch is also done. I'm just picking up one single thread here and I'm coming out. Now I will go back into the fold I'm picking up one thread from the opposite side and I will stay in the fold. Picking up another yarn from here, and I'm going to pick up one yarn from the lower stitch and I come back out. So if you see, this is my lower seam. I'm pulling a thread from there and I'm pulling my yarn out of that. I'm slipping into the fold, staying there and coming out. And I'm going to finish this entire edge with slip stitch very neatly. Now I have used hand stitching on the entire sample, but if you have an easy availability of a sewing machine, use a sewing machine for the first seam to get a stronger and a neater effect. So here is our completed sample with the entire slip stitch done. This is the right side of the sample and this is the wrong side. So since we've used a contrast color thread, some of the stitches are visible, but when you use a matching thread, none of these threads are going to be visible. So here we have completed convex bias facing. Now similarly, we are also going to do on the same sample, we are going to do a concave bias facing. So we will take the other bias strip and we will repeat exactly the same steps. So we are going to place the bias strip around the edge and we will pin it up together. Now, if you remember in the previous part when we were doing the convex bias facing, I had mentioned that we need to do vertical pinning for deeper curves. So here we have a deeper curve. So what we are going to do is we are going to hold the edge together and we will pin the edges vertically so that it does not stretch the bias too much and spoil the edge of the fabric. So this is how you do vertical pinning so that the bias strip does not get stretched and at the same time retains a good shape and finish. So gradually we are going to turn the fabric together and we are going to complete the pinning and then we will do the stitching of this once we hold the pieces together. So here we go. So after pinning the entire edge, I have stitched the entire edge together. Now after stitching the entire edge, you can see that it is getting a little raised because of the shape of the curve. So let's rerun. We have placed the bias strip and the fabric right side facing right side. When I have started with my work, I have left a little extra fabric here. Likewise, there is additional fabric here, which I'm going to leave some to fold in the raw edges, and I am trimming the rest off from here. Now, what I am going to do is I have done this stitching at 1 centimeter distance. I'm going to trim off 0.5 centimeters. So after we trim, this is how it looks like. The shape is sitting a lot better as compared to before. So now we are going to repeat the step like in convex facing. We are going to turn it around. Now the bias strip was already a little raised, so it makes our tasks easier. I'm going to fold in the raw edge from the top side, roll it down halfway through and then fold it in. And here I am ready to start with my slip stitch. So let's get started with the slip stitch. So after rolling the edge, I am slipping the knot again into the fold and we will start with our slip stitch. Let's get this done quickly. And just to recap, for slip stitch, we pass the thread on the lower fabric through the stitching line and not through the base fabric directly. and we are going to fold it in, and we are very neatly going to fold the edge, and we are going to slip the thread into the fold. So here I go back in the fold and I slip it in. So here, as you can see, I've completed the slip stitch, and this is what the final sample looks like with the piping complete. Now this is the right side where you cannot see any stitches or anything, while here on the wrong side you can see the stitches here. Now this again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm repeating that this is a completely hand sewn sample, which is why the finishing seems to be a little coarse. But if the first seam of joining of the bias as well as the poplin is done with a sewing machine, it will give you much more neatness. So here, completing both concave as well as convex piping on a 15 by 15 sample of poplin fabric. Thank you.